You know what time it is? Woo! Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Yes, lovelies! We are back! We're here with another installment of the Prydain Chronicles. This is book 4. We have one more book left until we're finished with the series. And this is Taran, Wanderer by Lloyd Alexander. Now, as I tried to give some hint last time we were here, and I want to apologize if it seems like I'm being a bit inconsistent with story time. I've had some updates within my own personal health that have caused me to be a bit tired, low energy, a bit nauseous at times. So I need to take that time to take care of myself so I can continue to bring wonderful stories and entertainment to you. And as always, you do not have to listen to these stories when they go live. You're more than welcome to listen to them in your downtime, nap time, max and relax and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, in between time, CP time, study time, break time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. So we're back. Oops, excuse me. Sorry, a little too much feedback. Too close. A little too close. Damn. So we are back with Lloyd Alexander's the 4th book in the Prydain Chronicles, Taran the Wanderer. Now, as I was trying to tell you all last time, this story is still a fantasy story, but it's going to be a bit different because we're talking about a installment within the series that is more of a coming-of-age story. What does that mean? So, coming of age is a term to refer to a part of a person's journey that allows them to mature and to grow. A moment of awakening, a moment of growth. Typically, coming of age stories are stories set in the youth of a character or a person, and it's the journey that allows them to come to an age of maturity that they can take with them for the rest of their life and then continue to grow from the experiences that they've had. So that's what this story is more so going to be about. So it's a bit dark, so I'm going to caution that. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and begin the first chapter as I almost knocked down my lamp. Sorry about that. Chapter 1. Who am I? It was full springtime with promise of the richest summer the farm had ever seen. The orchard was white with fragrant blossoms. The newly planted fields lay light as green mist. Yet the sight and sense gave Taran little joy. To him, Caer Dallben was empty. Though he helped Cole with the weeding and cultivating and tended the white pig Henwin with as much care as ever, he went about his tasks distractedly. One thought alone was in his mind. Oh no, Mr. Bookmark. I can get you a bookmark. You gotta change that. Hold on. Aha. Haha. Shout out to Dark Star Bookstore. Hopefully y'all can see that. They're amazing. Actually, besides Superfly, that is the other store I get most of my books from. So shout out to all our local bookshops. We love you, Dark Star Bookstore. We love you, Superfly Comics. "Now, my boy," Cole said good-naturedly as they finished the morning's milking, "I've seen you restless as a wolf on a tether ever since you came back from the Isle of Mona. Pine for the Princess Eilonwy if you must, but don't upset the milk pail." The stout old warrior clapped Taran on the shoulder. "Come, cheer up. I'll teach you the high secrets of planting turnips or raising cabbages, or whatever you might want to know." Taran shook his head. "What I wouldn't know, only Dallben can tell me." "Take my counsel, then," said Cole. "Trouble Dallben with none of your questions. His thoughts are on deeper matters. Have patience and bide your time." Taran rose to his feet. "I could bide my time no longer. It is in my heart to speak with him now." "Have a care," warned Cole as Taran strode to the door of the shed. "His disposition rubs a little thin." Taran made his way through the cluster of low-roofed farm buildings. In the cottage at the hearth's side, a black-robed woman crouched and tended the cooking fire. She did not raise her head or speak. It was Akren. Thwarted in her scheme to regain her ancient power from the ruined castle of Lur, the once haughty queen had accepted the refuge Dalbin offered, though by her own choice, who had long ago ruled Prydain, toiled now at the tasks Eilonwy had done before departing from Mona, and at day's end silently vanished to her pallet of straw in the granary. Before Dalbin's chamber, Taran paused uneasily, then rapped quickly on the door. Entering at the enchanter's command, he found Dalbin bent over the Book of Three, which lay open on the cluttered table. Much as he longed for a glimpse at even one page of the secret volume, Taran kept his distance from it. Once in boyhood, he dared not touch the ancient leather-bound tome. His fingers smarted again at the memory. I never cease to wonder, Dalbin testily remarked, closing the Book of Three and glancing at Taran, that the young, with all their pride of strength, should find their own concerns such a weighty burden. They must be shared with the old, whereas the old, he waved a frail bony hand, but no matter, for the sake of my temper, I hope your purpose in interrupting me is an excellent one. First, before you ask, Dalbin went on, I assure you that the Princess Eilonwy is well and no more unhappy than any pretty young madcap obliged to turn a hand to sewing instead of swordplay. Secondly, you are as aware as I am that Caw has not yet returned. By now, I dare say he has borne my potion to Glue's cavern, and the giant by accident who troubled you so much on Mona will shrink to the small stature he once had. But you also know your crow for a rascal and one to linger wherever he finds sport. Finally, an assistant pigkeeper should have tasks enough to busy himself outdoors. What then brings you here?
What they goli, Taran said. All that I have I owe to your kindness. You've given me a home and a name, and let me live as your son in your household. Yet, who am I? In truth, who are my parents? You've taught me much, but kept this always from me.
Since it has always been thus, Dalbin replied, why should it trouble you now? When Taran bowed his head and did not answer, the old enchanter smiled shrewdly at him. Speak up, my boy. If you want truth, you should begin by giving it. Behind your question, I think I see the shadow of a certain golden-haired princess. Is that not so?
Taran's face flushed. It is so, he murmured. He raised his eyes to meet Dalbin's. When Eilonwy returns, it is in my heart to ask her to wed. But this I cannot do, he burst out. This I will not do until I learn who I am. An unknown foundling with a borrowed name cannot ask for the hand of a princess. What is my parentage? I cannot rest until I know. Am I lowly born or nobly?
To my mind, Dalbin said softly, the latter would please you better.
It would be my hope.
Taran admitted, a little abashed, but no matter. If there is honor, yes, let me share it. If there is shame, let me face it. It takes as much strength to share the one as to face the other, Dalbin replied gently. He turned his careworn face to Taran. But alas, he said, what you ask I may not answer. Prince Gwydion knows more than I, he went on, sensing Taran's thought, nor can the High King Math help you.
Then let me learn for myself, Taran cried. Give me leave to seek my own answer. Taran studied him carefully. The enchanter's eyes fell on the Book of Three, and he gazed long at it, as though his glance penetrated deep into the worn leather volume.
Once the apple is ripe, he murmured to himself.
I try to say mumble and murmur at the same time. Sorry, y'all. Murmured to himself.
No man can turn back to a greening.
His voice grew heavy with sorrow as he said to Taran,
Is
indeed your wish?" Taran's heart quickened. "I ask nothing more." Dalbin nodded. "So it must be. Journey then wherever you choose. Learn what lies in your power to learn." "Yeah, you have all my thanks," Taran cried joyfully, bowing deeply. "Let me start without delay. I am ready." Before he could finish, the door burst open and a shaggy figure sped across the chamber and flung itself at Taran's feet. "No, no, no!" howled Gurgi at the top of his voice, rocking back and forth and waving his hairy arms. "Sharp-eared Gurgi hears all. Oh, yes, with listenings behind the door." His voice wrinkled in misery, and he shook his matted head so violently he nearly sprawled flat on the floor. "Poor Gurgi will be lone and alone with whinings and pinings," he moaned. "Oh, he must go with Master. Yes, yes!" Taran put a hand on Gurgi's shoulder. "It would sadden me to leave you, old friend, but my road, I fear, may be a long one." "Faithful Gurgi will follow," pleaded Gurgi. "He is strong, bold, and clever to keep kindly master from harmful hurtings." Gurgi began snuffling loudly, whimpering and moaning more desperately than before, and Taran, who could not bring himself to deny the unhappy creature, looked questioningly at Dalbin. A strange glance of pity crossed the enchanter's face. "Gurgi's staunchness and good sense I do not doubt," he said to Taran, "though before your search is ended, the comfort of his kindly heart may stand you in better stead. Yes," he added slowly, "if Gurgi is willing, let him journey with you." Gurgi gave a joyous yelp, and Taran bowed gratefully to the enchanter. "So be it," Dalbin said. "Your road, indeed, will not be easy, but set out on it as you choose. Though you may not find what you seek, you will surely return a little wiser, and perhaps even grown to manhood in your own right." That night Taran lay restless. Dalbin had agreed the two companions I'm so sorry, y'all, could depart in the morning, but for Taran the hours until sunrise weighed like the links of a heavy chain. A plan had formed in his mind, but he had said nothing of it to Dalbin, Cole, or Gurgi, for he was half full of fear of what he had decided, while his heart ached at the thought of leaving Caer Dalbin. It ached the more with impatience to begin his journey, and it was as though his yearning for Eilonwy, the love he had often hidden or even denied, now swelled like a flood, driving him before it. Long before dawn, Taran rose and saddled the gray, silver-maned stallion Melalas, while Gurgi, blinking and yawning, readied his own mount, a short, stocky pony, almost as shaggy as himself. Taran went alone to Henwin's enclosure, as though she had already sensed Taran's decision. The white pig squealed dolefully as he knelt and put an arm around her. "Farewell, Hen," Taran said, scratching her bristly chin. "Remember me kindly. Cole will care for you until I—" "Oh, Hen," he murmured, "shall I come to the end of my quest happy? Can you tell me? Can you give me some kind of good hope?" In answer, however, the oracular pig only wheezed and grunted anxiously. Taran sighed and gave Henwin a last affectionate pat. Dalbin had hobbled into the doorway, and beside him Cole raised a torch, for the morning still was dark. Like Dalbin's, the old warrior's face in the wavering light was filled with fond concern. Taran embraced them, and to him it seemed his love for both had never been greater than at this leaving-taking as they said their farewells. Gurgi sat hunched atop the pony. Slung from his shoulder was his leather wallet with his inextinguishable supply of food, bearing only his sword at his belt and the silver-bowed battle-hoard Eilonwy had given him. Taran swung astride the impatient Melalas, constraining himself not to glance backward, knowing if he did his parting would grieve him the more deeply. The two wayfarers rode steadily while the sun had climbed higher above the rolling, tree-fringed hills. Taran had spoken little, and Gurgi trotted quietly behind him, delving now and then into the leather wallet for a handful of food, which he munched contentedly. When they halted to water their mounts at a stream, Gurgi clambered down and went to Taran's side.
kindly master, he cried. Faithful Gurgi follows as he leads. Oh, yes, where does he journey first with amblings and ramblings? To noble Lord Gwydion and Caer Dathor? Gurgi longs to see high golden towers and great halls for feastings.
I too, answered Taran, but it would be labor lost. Dalbin has told me Prince Gwydion and King Math know nothing of my parentage.
Into kingdom of Flood or Flam? Yes, yes! Bold bard will welcome us with meetings and greetings, with merry hummings and strummings.
Taran smiled at Gurgi's eagerness, but shook his head. No, my friend, not to Caer Dathor, nor to Flooder's realm. He turned his eyes westward. I have thought carefully of this, and I believe there's only one place where I might find what I seek, he said slowly. The marshes of Morva.
That's better.
No sooner had he spoken these words than he saw Gurgi's face turn ashen. The creature's jaw dropped. He clapped his hands to his shaggy head and began gasping and choking frightfully.
No, oh no, Gurgi howled. Dangers lurk in evil marshes. Bold but courageous Gurgi fears for his poor tender head. He wants never to return there. Fearsome enchantresses would have turned him into a toad with hoppings and floppings. Oh, terrible Ordu, terrible Orwin, and Orgak. Oh, Orgak, worst of all.
Yet I mean to face them again, Taran said. Ordu, Orwin, and Orgak, she, or they, whatever they may really be, are as powerful as Dalbin, perhaps more powerful. Nothing is hidden from them. All secrets are open. They would know the truth. Could it not be, he went on, his voice quickening hopefully, could it not be that my parents were of noble lineage, and for some secret reason left me with Dalbin to foster?
But kindly master is noble, Gurgi cried. Noble, generous, and good to humble Gurgi. No need to ask enchantresses.
I speak of noble blood, Taran replied, smiling at Gurgi's protest. If Dalbin cannot tell me, then Ordu may. Whether she will, I do not know, he added. But I must try.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I won't have you risk your poor tender head, Taran continued. You shall find a hiding place at the edge of the marshes, and wait for me there.
No, no,
Gurgi moaned. He blinked wretchedly, and his voice fell so low that Taran could scarcely hear his trembling whisper.
Faithful Gurgi follows, as he promised.
They set out again. For some days after fording Great Avred, they bore quickly westward along the green slopes of the riverbank, leaving it reluctantly to wend north across a fallen plain. Gurgi's face puckered anxiously, and Taran sensed the creature's disquiet no less than his own. The closer they drew to the marshes, the more he questioned the wisdom of his choice. His plan, which had seemed so fitting in the safety of Caer Dalbin, now struck him as rash, a foolhardy venture. There were moments when Taran admitted to himself, had Gurgi spun the pony about and bolted homeward, he would have gladly done likewise. Another day's journey, and the marshland stretched before them, bleak, ugly, untouched by spring. The sight and smell of the bogs and the dull, stagnant pools filled Taran with loathing. The rotting turf sucked greedily at the hooves of Melilas. The pony snorted fearfully, warning Gurgi to stay close behind him and stray neither to the right nor left. Taran cautiously guided the stallion through beds of reeds shoulder high, keeping to the firmer ground at the rim of the swamps. The narrow neck at the upper reaches of the marshes could be crossed with least danger, and the path indeed was burned into his memory. Here, when he had Alanwig, Gurgi, and Flooder, and had sought the Black Cauldron, the huntsmen of Anuvan had attacked them, and Taran had lived the moment again and again in nightmares. Giving Melilas rein, he beckoned to Gurgi and rode into the marshes. The stallion faltered a sickening instant, then found footing on the chain of islands that lay beneath the brackish water. At the far side, without Taran's urging, Melilas broke into a gallop, and the pony pelted after, as though fleeing for its life. Beyond the stunted trees, at the end of a long gully, Taran halted. Ordu's cottage lay straight ahead. Built inside the side of a high mound, half hidden by sod and branches, it seemed in even greater disrepair than Taran had remembered. The thatched roof, like a huge bird's nest, strangled down to block the narrow windows. A spider web of mold covered the walls, which looked ready to tumble at any moment. In the crooked doorway stood Ordu herself. Heart-pounding, Taran swung from the saddle, holding his head high in a silence broken only by the chattering of Gurgi's teeth. He strode slowly across the doorway. Ordu was watching him with sharp black eyes. If she was surprised, the enchantress gave no sign other than to bend forward a little and peer more closely at Taran. Her shapeless robe flapped about her knees. The jeweled clasps and pins glittered in her weedy tangle of disheveled hair as she nodded her head rapidly and with evident satisfaction. "Yes, and so it is," Ordu called out pleasantly. "The dear little fledgling and the whatever you call it. But you've grown much taller, my duck. How troublesome it must have been, should you ever want to climb down a rabbit hole. Come in, she hurried on, beckoning. So pale you are, poor thing. You've not been well?" Taran followed her, not without uneasiness, while Gurgi shuddered, clung to him.
Beware, the creature whimpered. Warm welcomings give Gurgi frosty chillings.
The three enchantresses, so far as Taran could see, had been busy at household tasks. Orgok, her black hood shrouding her features, sat on a rickety stool, tying without great success to tease cockleburs from a lap of wool shearings. Orwin, if indeed it was Orwin, was turning a rather lopsided spinning wheel. The milky white beads dangling from her neck seemed in danger of catching in the spokes. Ordu herself, he guessed, had been at the loom that stood amid piles of ancient rusted weapons in a corner of the cottage. The work on the frame had gone forward somewhat, but it was far from done. Knotted, twisted threads strangled in all directions, but what looked like some of Orgok's cockleburs were snagged in the warp and weft. Taran could make out nothing of the pattern, though it seemed to him as if by some trick of his eyes that vague shapes, human and animal, moved and shifted through the weaving. But he had no chance to study the curious tapestry. Orwin, leaving the wheel, hastened to him, clapping her hands delightedly. "The wandering chicken and the Gurgi!" she cried. "How is dear little Dolben? Does he still have the Book of Three? And his beard? How heavy it must be for him! The book, not the beard!" she added. "Did he not come with you? More's the pity, but no matter. It's so charming to have visitors."
I don't care for visitors,
muttered Orgok, irritably tossing the wool to the ground.
They disagree with me.
"Of course they do, greedy thing," Orwin replied sharply. "And I wonder it is that we have any at all."
At this, Orgok snorted and mumbled under her breath. Beneath her black hood, Taran glimpsed a shadowy grimace. Ordu raised a hand. Pay Orgok no heed," she said to Taran. "She's out of sorts today, poor dear. It was Orwin's turn to be Orgok, and Orgok was so looking forward to being Orwin. Now she's disappointed since Orwin at the last moment simply refused. Not that I blame her," Ordu whispered. "I don't enjoy being Orgok either, and we'll make it up to her somehow." "And you," Ordu went on, a smiley wrinkling on her lumpy face, "you are the boldest of abode goslings. Few in Predane have been willing to brave the marshes of Morva, and of those few not one has dared to return. Perhaps Orgok disheartens them. You alone have done so, my chick."
"Oh, Ordu, he is a brave hero," Orwin put in, looking at Taran with a girlish admiration.
"Don't talk nonsense, Orwin," Ordu replied. "There are heroes and heroes. I don't deny he's acted bravely on occasion. He's fought beside Lord Gwydion and been proud of himself as a chick wearing eagle's feathers, but there's only one kind of bravery." Has the darling robin ever scratched for his own worms? There's bravery of another sort, and between the two, dear Orwen, it might find the latter shows the greater courage. The enchantress turned to Taran. But speak up, my fledgling. Why do you seek us again?
Don't tell us, interrupted Orwen. Let us guess. Oh, but I do love games, thought Orgok. The Orgok always spoils them, she giggled. You shall give us 1,003 guesses, and I shall be first to ask.
Very well, Orwen, if it pleases you, Ordu said indulgently. But are 1,003 enough? A young lamb can want for so much. Your concern is with things as they are, Taran said, forcing himself to look the enchantress in the eyes, and with things as they must be. I believe you know my quest from its beginning to its end, and that I seek to learn my parentage. Parentage? Said Ordu. Nothing easier. Choose any parents you please, since none of you has ever known each other. What difference can it possibly make to them or to you? Believe what you like. You'll be surprised how comforting it is. I ask no comfort, Taran replied, but the truth, be it harsh or happy. Ah, my sweet Robin, said Ordu, for the finding of that nothing is harder. There are those who have spent lifetimes at it, and many in worse plight than yours. There was a frog some time ago, Ordu went on cheerfully. I remember him well, poor dear. Never seemed whether he was a land creature, or liked swimming under water, or a water creature who liked sunning himself on logs. We turned him into a stork with a keen appetite for frogs, and from then on he had no doubts as to who he was, nor did the other frogs, for the matter of that. We would gladly do the same for you.
For both of you, said Orgok.
No!
Yelled Gurgi, ducking behind Taran.
Oh, kindly Master Gurgi warned of fearsome changings and arrangings.
Don't forget the serpent, Orwen told Ordu, all fretted and perplexed because he didn't know if he was green with brown spots or brown with green spots. We made him an invisible serpent, she added, with brown and green spots, so he could be clearly seen and not trodden on. He was so grateful and much easier in his mind after that. And I recall, croaked Orgok huskily, clearing her throat, there was a... Do be still, Orgok, Orwen interrupted. Your tales always have such untidy endings.
You see, my pullet, Ordu said, we can help you in many ways, all quicker and simpler than any you might think of. What would you rather be? If you want my opinion, I suggest a hedgehog. It's safer life than most, but don't let me sway your choice. It's entirely up to you.
On the contrary, let's surprise them, cried Orwen in happy excitement. We'll decide amongst ourselves and spare them the tedious business of making up their minds. They'll be all the more pleased. How charming it will be to see the look on their little faces or beaks or whatever it is they finally have. No fowls, grumbled Orgok. No fowls. In any case, can't abide them. Feathers make me cough.
Gurgi's fright had so mounted he could only babble wordlessly. Taran felt his own blood run cold. Ordu had taken a step forward, and Taran defensively reached for his sword. Now, my chicken, Ordu cheerily remarked, don't lose your temper, or you might lose considerably more. You know your blade is useless here, and waving swords is no way to set anyone in a proper frame of mind. It was you who chose to put yourselves in our hands.
Hands?
Growled Orgok from the depths of the hood. Her eyes flashed readily, and her mouth began twitching. Taran stood firm. Ordu, he said, keeping his voice as steady as he could, will you tell me what I ask? If not, we will go our way.
We are only trying to make things easier for you, said Orwen, pouting and touching her beads. You need not take offense.
Of course we shall tell you, my brave tadpole, Ordu said. You shall know all you seek to know. Directly we've settled another matter. The price to be paid, since what you ask is of such importance, to yourself at least. The cost may be rather high, but I'm sure you thought of that before you came. When we sought the Black Cauldron, Taran began, you took Adion's enchanted brooch and fee, the one thing I treasured most. Since then, I have found nothing I have prized more.
But my chicken, said Ordu. We struck that bargain long ago. It was over and done. Are you saying you brought nothing with you? Why, count yourself lucky to become a hedgehog, since you can afford little else.
Last time,
Orgok hoarsely whispered in Ordu's ear,
you'd have taken one of the young lamb's summer days, and a tasty morsel if it would have been.
You're always thinking of your own pleasures, Orgok, replied Ordu. You might at least try to think of what we all would like.
There was a golden-haired girl with him then, Orwin put in. A pretty little creature. He surely has lovely memories of her. Could we not take them? She went on eagerly. How delightful it would be to spread them out and look at them during long winter evenings. Alas, he would have none for himself, but I think it would be an excellent bargain.
Taran caught his breath. Even you would not be so pitiless.
Would we not? Answered Ordu, smiling. Pity, dear gosling, as you know it at least, simply doesn't enter into the question, as far as we're concerned. However, she went on, turning to Orwin, that won't answer either. We already have quite enough memories.
Hear me then, cried Taran, drawing himself up to his full height. He clutched his hands to keep them from trembling. It is true, I own little to treasure, not even my name. Is there nothing you will have of me? This I offer you, he went on quickly in a low voice. He felt his brow dampen, though he had taken this decision at Caerdabin and weighed it carefully. With the moment upon him, he nearly faltered and longed to turn from it. Whatever thing of value I may find in all my life to come, Taran said, the greatest treasure that may come into my hands, I pledge to you now. It shall be yours, and you shall claim it when you please.
Ordu did not answer. Only looked at him curiously. The other enchantresses were silent. Even Gurgi had ceased his whimpering. The shapes on the loom seemed to writhe before Taran's eyes as he waited for Ordu to speak. The enchantress smiled. Does your quest mean so much that you would spend what you have not yet gained?
Or may never gain, croaked Orgok.
No more can I offer, Taran cried. You cannot refuse me.
That kind of bargain you propose, said Ordu in a pleasant but matter-of-fact tone, is a chancy thing at best and really satisfies no one. Nothing is all that certain, and very often we find the poor sparrow who makes such a pledge never lives long enough to fulfill it. When he does, there is always the risk of his turning, well, shall we say, a little stubborn. It usually ends with unhappy feelings all around. Once we might have accepted, but sad experience makes us put a stop to it altogether. No, my fledgling, it won't do. We're sorry. That is, sorry as much as we can feel sorrow for anything.
Taran's voice caught in his throat. For an instant, the features of the enchantresses shifted. He could not be sure whether it was Ordu, Orwin, or Orgok whom he faced. It was as though they had risen in front of him a wall of ice which at force could not bear not pleading melt. Despair choked him. He bowed his head and turned away.
But, my dear gosling, Ordu called cheerfully, that's not to say there aren't others to answer your question.
Of course there are, added Ordu, and the finding takes no more than the looking.
Who then? Taran asked urgently, seizing on this new hope.
I recall a brown and orange ousel that comes once a year to sharpen his beak on Mount Kilgary, said Orwood. He knows all that there has ever happened. If you're patient, you might wait and ask him.
Oh, Orwin, Ordu interrupted with some impatience. Sometimes I do believe you dwell too much in the past. Mount Kilgary has been worn down long ago with his pecking, and the little darling has flown elsewhere.
You're so right, dear Ordu, replied Orwin. It had slipped my mind for a moment. But what of the salmon of Lake Lou? I've never met a wiser fish.
Gone, muttered Orgok, sucking a tooth. Long gone. In any case, owls and fishes are flighty and slippery, Ordu said. Something more reliable will serve better. You might, for example, try the Mirror of Lunette. The Mirror of Lunette? Taran repeated. I've never heard of it spoken of. What is it? Where?
Best yet, Orgu broke in. He could stay with us. And the Gurgi, too.
Do not and do try to control yourself, dear Orgok, when I'm explaining something, Ordu remarked, then turned back to Taran. Yes, perhaps if you looked into it, the Mirror of Lunette would show you something of interest. But where? Taran began again.
Too far, grumbled Orgok. Stay by all means.
In the Law Garden Mountains, replied Ordu, taking him by the arm. If it hasn't been moved, but come along, my gosling. Orgok is growing restless. I knew she'd only enjoy having you here, and with 2 disappointments in the same day, I shouldn't want to account for her behavior. But how may I find it? Taran could do no more than stammer his question before he was outside the cottage, with Gurgi trembling at his side. Don't tarry in the marshes, Ordu called, while from within the cottage Taran heard loud and angry noises, unless you may regret your foolish boldness or bold foolishness, whichever. Farewell, my Robin. The crooked door closed tightly, even as Taran cried out for Ordu to wait.
Flee! Gurgi yelped. Flee, kindly master, while Gurgi's poor tender head is still on his shoulders.
Despite the creature's frantic tugging at his arm, Taran stood staring at the door. His thoughts were confused. A strange heaviness had settled upon him. Why did she mock my bravery? He said, frowning. Courage to scratch for worms? That task would be far easier than seeking the Mirror of Lunette.
Hasten, Gurgi pleaded. Gurgi has his fill of questings. Now he is ready for returning to safe and happy care, but yes, oh, do not make useless peekings and seekings.
Taran hesitated a moment. Of the Law Garden Mountains, he knew only that they rose far to the east. With nothing to guide his search, the journey might indeed prove useless. Gurgi looked imploringly at him. Taran patted the creature's shoulder, then turned and strawed to Melalas. The Mirror of Lunette is the only hope Ordu has given me, Taran said. I must find it. While Gurgi hastily mounted his pony, Taran swung astride Melalas. He glanced once again at the cottage, his heart subtly uneasy. Given me? He murmured. Does Ordu give anything for nothing? And that is where we will end for today. So, there's a reason I love, if you haven't guessed, I love narrating the characters of Ordu, Orwin, and Orgok. They're 3 of my favorite enchantresses in fiction. And I love them in the Disney film Black Cauldron. You nasty, disgusting creatures! You shall all be turned into frogs and eaten! And if you remember me reading The Black Cauldron, you know what I'm talking about. Now, as always, I bid you all a lovely evening. And thank you all so much for joining me, and I will see you all next time. Join us tomorrow on Instagram for our continued reading of Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, Book 4, The Miserable Mill. And I will see you all here on Wednesday for our continued reading of Taran Wanderer. Bye, y'all. See ya.